It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 5, printed on Part B of the House Report 118-261. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 5, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-261, offered by Ms. Escobar of Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 838, the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Escobar, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. Their chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My amendment highlights the importance of the Thriving Communities program within the Department of Transportation, which my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have struck funding for. The Biden-Harris administration launched this much-needed program in 2022 to prepare state, local, tribal, and territorial governments to better access federal funding for their communities. This program is intended to help provide technical assistance to under-resourced and disadvantaged communities to help them identify, develop, and deliver on transportation, housing, and other much-needed community revitalization opportunities. It is unfortunate to see that my colleagues on the other side have eliminated this program, which helps communities in their own districts. Not only does the program provide technical assistance, it also provides grant and financial management support, pre-development assistance, community engagement, planning, and project delivery support. With historical funding provided by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, it has been a priority for the Biden-Harris administration to ensure federal investments that tackle climate, clean energy, and transportation initiatives be equitably distributed to economically disadvantaged communities, as well as rural communities. In fact, many of the same colleagues who approve of slashing this funding have actually enjoyed and celebrated the projects built in their districts with this money. I represent El Paso, Texas, an economically disadvantaged community that would benefit from the Thriving Communities program. But by eliminating this program, communities like mine and many like it across the country will not have the needed resources or equal opportunity to access and benefit from available federal funding for vital projects in their community. Rural communities especially will suffer. And as we know, economically disadvantaged and rural communities across this country deserve programs like this because they know their needs, but lack the needed resources to seek federal funding. It is programs like the Thriving Communities program that continue to help the most vulnerable access the historic federal funding passed by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act. Mr. Chairman, I reserve my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. For what purposes does the gentleman from Oklahoma seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I claim time in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman has 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Thriving Communities program is frankly a duplicative to the technical assistance already provided by the DOT's Office of the Secretary. I recognize the burdens that rural, tribal, and disadvantaged communities face in obtaining federal grant funds, but a $25 million office focused on providing additional technical assistance is unnecessary. DOT should focus on simplifying the grant application process as opposed to a slush fund for additional grant consultants. I understand that this program has received a total of $50 million in funding over the last 2 years. However, even the Senate recognizes that this program does not need any more funding. They detail in their report that they are also not providing any funding for this program this year because the program still has $28 million in unused balances. So we simply don't think it's necessary and would urge the rejection of the amendment. Yield back my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Quigley.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in strong support of my colleague's amendment. The Thriving Communities program facilitates the planning and development of community revitalization activities to ensure that under-resourced and disadvantaged communities can access funding provided in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Many rural and tribal communities have that have suffered historic disinvestment lack the resources and capacity to successfully develop infrastructure projects and access critical federal funding. The elimination of Thriving Communities program is just another example of my colleagues across the aisle turning their back on the very communities they represent. I strongly support my colleagues' amendment, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman controls the remaining time.
I reserve.
The gentlewoman controls the remaining time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to add that in closing, eliminating this funding is reckless. It will make it harder for underserved and rural communities across the United States to access this much-needed federal funding. We know that investment in infrastructure especially doesn't just help rebuild our country, but it creates jobs, badly needed American jobs that help communities across America thrive. That is why I ask my colleagues to support this amendment, and with that, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not.
Mr. Chairman, I request the yeas and nays.
Do you request a recorded vote?
I do.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Texas will be postponed. It is now in order to consider amendment number 6, printed in Part B of House Report 118-261. For what purposes does the